I agree.
Senator Sass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Zuckerberg, thanks for being here. At current pace, you're due to be done with first round of questioning by about 1 a.m., so congratulations. I like Chris Coons a lot, with his own family or with Dan Sullivan's family. Both are great photos. But I want to ask a similar set of questions from the other side, maybe. I think the conceptual line between mere tech company, mere tools, and an actual content company, I think it's really hard. I think you guys have a hard challenge. I think regulation over time will have a hard challenge. And you're a private company, so you can make policies that may be less than First Amendment full spirit embracing, in my view. But I worry about that. I worry about a world where when you go from violent groups to hate speech in a hurry, in one of your responses to one of the opening questions, you may decide, or Facebook may decide, it needs to police a whole bunch of speech that I think America might be better off not having policed by one company that has a really big and powerful platform. Can you define hate speech?
Senator, I think that this is a really hard question, and I think it's one of the reasons why we struggle with it. There are certain definitions that we have around, calling for violence or.
Let's just agree on that. If somebody's calling for violence, that shouldn't be there. I'm worried about the psychological categories around speech. You used language of safety and protection earlier. We see this happening on college campuses all across the country. It's dangerous. 40% of Americans under age 35 tell pollsters they think the First Amendment is dangerous because you might use your freedom to say something that hurts somebody else's feelings. Guess what? There are some really passionately held views about the abortion issue on this panel today. Can you imagine a world where you might decide that pro-lifers are prohibited from speaking about their abortion views on your content, on your platform?
I certainly would not want that to be the case.
But it might really be unsettling to people who've had an abortion to have an open debate about that, wouldn't it?
It might be, but I don't think that would fit any of the definitions of what we have. But I do generally agree with the point that you're making, which is as we're able to technologically shift towards especially having AI proactively look at content, I think that that's going to create massive questions for society about what obligations we want to require companies to fulfill. And I do think that that's a question that we need to struggle with as a country, because I know other countries are, and they're putting laws in place. And I think that America needs to figure out and create the set of principles that we want American companies to operate under.
Thanks. I wouldn't want you to leave here today and think there's sort of a unified view in the Congress that you should be moving toward policing more and more and more speech. I think violence has no place on your platform. Sex traffickers and human traffickers have no place on your platform. But vigorous debates, adults need to engage in vigorous debates. I have only a little less than 2 minutes left, so I want to shift gears a little bit. But that was about adults. You're a dad. I'd like to talk a little bit about social media addiction. You started your comments today by talking about how Facebook is and was founded as an optimistic company. You and I have had conversations separate from here. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think as you've aged, you might be a little bit less idealistic and optimistic than you were when you started Facebook. As a dad, do you worry about social media addiction as a problem for America's teens?
Well, my hope is that we can be idealistic but have a broad view of our responsibility. To your point about teens, this is certainly something that I think any parent thinks about, is how much do you want your kids using technology? At Facebook specifically, I view our responsibility as not just building services that people like, but building services that are good for people and good for society as well. So we study a lot of effects of well-being of our tools and broader technology. And like any tool, there are good and bad uses of it. What we find in general is that if you're using social media in order to build relationships, right? So you're sharing content with friends, you're interacting, then that is associated with all of the long-term measures of well-being that you would intuitively think of. Long-term health, long-term happiness, long-term feeling connected, feeling less lonely. But if you're using the internet and social media primarily to just passively consume content and you're not engaging with other people, then it doesn't have those positive effects and it could be negative.
We're almost at time, so I want to ask you one more. Do social media companies hire consulting firms to help them figure out how to get more dopamine feedback loops so that people don't want to leave the platform?
No, Senator. That's not how we talk about this or how we set up our product teams. We want our products to be valuable to people, and if they're valuable, then people will choose to use them.
Are you aware of other social media companies that do hire such consultants?
Not sitting here today.
Thanks.
Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response to Senator Blumenthal's pointed questions, you refused to answer whether Facebook should be required by law to obtain clear permission from users before selling or sharing their personal information. So I'm going to ask it one more time. Yes or no? Should Facebook get clear permission from users before selling or sharing sensitive information about your health, your finances, your relationships? Should you have to get their permission? That's essentially the consent decree with the Federal Trade Commission that you signed in 2011. Should you have to get permission? Should the consumer have to opt in?
Senator, we do require permission to use the system and to put information in there and for all the uses of it. I want to be clear. We don't sell information. So regardless of whether we could get permission to do that, that's just not a thing that we're going to go do.
So would you support legislation? I have a bill, Senator Blumenthal referred to it, the Consent Act, that would just put on the books a law that said that Facebook and any other company that gathers information about Americans has to get their permission, their affirmative permission, before it can be reused for other purposes. Would you support that legislation to make it a national standard for not just Facebook, but for all the other companies out there, some of them bad actors? Would you support that legislation?
Senator, in general, I think that principle is exactly right, and I think we should have a discussion around how to best codify
would you
that.
support legislation to back that general principle, that opt-in, that getting permission is the standard? Would you support legislation to make that the American standard? Europeans have passed that as a law. Facebook's going to live with that law beginning on May 25th. Would you support that as the law in the United States?
Senator, as a principle, yes, I would. I think the details matter a lot.
Right,
and
but assuming that we work out the details, you do support opt-in as the standard, getting permission affirmatively as the standard for the United States. Is that correct?
Senator, I think that's the right principle. And 100 billion times a day in our services, when people go to share content, they choose who they want to share it affirmatively.
You could support a law that enshrines that as the promise that we make to the American people, that permission has to be obtained before their information is used. Is that correct?
Senator, yes. I've said that in principle. I think that makes sense, and the details matter. And I look forward to having our team work with you on fleshing that out.
Right. So the next subject, because I want to, again, I want to make sure that we kind of drill down here. You earlier made reference to the Child Online Privacy Protection Act of 1999, which I am the author of. So that is the Constitution for child privacy protection online in the country, and I'm very proud of that. But there are no protections additionally for a 13, a 14, or a 15-year-old. They get the same protections that a 30-year-old or a 50-year-old get. So I have a separate piece of legislation to ensure that kids who are under 16 absolutely have a privacy bill of rights, and that permission has to be received from their parents or the children before any of their information is reused for any other purpose other than that which was originally intended. Would you support a child online privacy bill of rights for kids under 16 to guarantee that that information is not reused for any other purpose without explicit permission from the parents or the kids?
Senator, I think as a general principle, I think protecting minors and protecting their privacy is extremely important. And we do a number of things on Facebook to do that already, which I'm happy to get into.
And I appreciate it. I'm talking about a law. I'm talking about a law. Would you support a law to ensure that kids under 16 have this privacy bill of rights? I had this conversation with you in your office 7 years ago about this specific subject in Palo Alto. And I think that's really what the American people want to know right now. What is the protections of this? What are the protections that are going to be put on the books for their families, but especially for their children? Would you support a privacy bill of rights for kids where opt-in is the standard? Yes or no?
Senator, I think that's an important principle. And
I appreciate that.
And I think we should.
Do we need a law to protect those children? That's my question to you. Do you believe we need a law to do so? Yes or no?
Senator, I'm not sure if we need a law, but I think that this is certainly a thing that deserves a lot of discussion.
I couldn't disagree with you more. We're leaving these children to the most rapacious commercial predators in the country who will exploit these children unless we absolutely have a law on the books.
Please,
and I think it is absolutely
Please give a short answer.
Senator, I look forward to having my team follow up to flesh out the details of it.
I don't think this is a
Senator
difficult
Flake.
issue to get a correct answer to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.